If you're looking to make something cool and custom for Halloween, I've got just the idea. And all you need is a skull. This one is 3D printed. You don't have to have a 3D printed one. You can buy one from any of the hobby shops. I've painted the eyes black just because later in the process, getting into the eye sockets will be a pain in the backside. But I want to go through this and show you how you make it from a basic 3D printed skull like this one into something a bit cool. Now what you're going to need is some cling film, Pritt stick, which is optional. You can use anything just basically to hold the first layer of the cling film to the skull. And then you're going to need some sort of heat source. So I've got a heat gun. You could use a hairdryer, but heat gun is preferable. And all we're simply going to do is we're going to start gluing up the skull. And this will just, as I say, help the cling film stick to it on the first layer. If you don't do this, you'll just be constantly chasing it around and trying to get it on there. So all I'm going to do is really randomly dab bits of glue, try and get it into a few of the locations where I think it might slide off. When you're doing this, make sure you use a glue that can be heated, so don't use super glue. Check the label of the glue before you use it, and don't just listen to some guy on YouTube. I have no idea what I'm talking about when it comes to glue. And also, this glue is probably about 10 years old. It was one of my kids when they took it to secondary school for the first time. They never used it. So this next step is extremely delicate, and you really have to plan it. What you're going to do is slap as much on here as you can and just wrap it random. So there's no right or wrong way to do this at first. What you're going to just try and do is get some layers down, just cover the skull. And don't worry about if you get too many lines. You kind of want lines because that is going to replicate skin, tissue. All right, so flatten it all down. And that is when the heat gun comes in. And all you're simply doing is you're trying to melt the plastic, but also make it stick to each other. And you want it to kind of crumple up and look like burnt skin, look like charred skin. Okay, we've gone over with our first pass. Now, because this is PLA, it is going to melt in places. And you can see here at the back, we have some divots. But what I'm going to do is actually just going to leave that. I'm going to just say that the skull was misshapen. So depending on what material you use and depending on how intense you go with the heat gun, just be careful not to really put your fingers in there and compress the skull too much. I'm going to give that time to cool down before going for another round. I'll bring that close to the camera so you can have a look. So as you can see, we've gone and really tried to get a few melted bits around here, especially over the eyes. We're still going to leave some of these stringy bits, and it's just going to... So I'm going to cut the mouth in a little bit and try and get a bit more material for the lips, and then maybe put a little bit more on the brow here. As you can see, I went a little bit too crazy up here, melted it and burnt it slightly. And you can see on the top of the skull, maybe, go down there, that we have a divot on the top of here as well. So yeah, this skull is quite badly deformed because it is a PLA skull. So just bear that in mind when you're going around doing this. All right, we're going to try and do the lips. So basically I'm going to stick a little bit of material down the bottom of here, that top here, and probably a bit more across the top of there. So this time I'm actually tucking it in from the top lip. I'm going to tuck that in under here instead and see how that looks. Okay, we're going to leave that there. We'll see how that looks when it comes. You can use storytelling to fix any problems anyway. So if you find you've got too much in one corner, you can just make that part of the product rather than trying to explain it away. But I think we've got a good first layer here. So now we can start going over with our different coloured washes, which is just basically acrylic paint and water. And then that will give us our base. All right, next up, we're going to start painting a base colour. This is fully cooled down now, so it's not even slightly warm. What we're going to do is we're going to mix a red, blue, and yellow. I'm going to try and get brown out of that. If you've got brown paint, then you can skip this step and go straight into actually using brown. I don't have any brown paint. I don't think the wash was giving us the results we wanted, so I'm just going to go in with a much thicker layer of brown paint. A little bit of this just to give it some more brand. There we go, that's looking better. So a damp cloth just straight onto paint seems to work a little bit better. The light's making this look a bit orange on the camera, but it looks pretty good up close. Brown, which is what we're going for. And this is kind of like your base of the skull, of the decay, if you like, and the rot. Okay, I've given that a quick blast of the heat gun, just dry it out. You need to be careful not to ruin your plastic when you do that. You need some green. So I'm going to drop the green straight on top of what's left of the brown, which isn't much because I cleaned a bit of it off. We also have some brown on the brush and in the water, so this gives us kind of a dirty green look, which is going to be more for highlighting areas that might be starting to rot or starting to decay or become infected with a random virus. and dab this away. It just gives that little bit of extra colour mix in there. It's pulling off some of the brown, so it's making the top more varied in colour. There's actually a white spot back here, which is bugging me. Okay, so that's dropped a few more green bits around, just tap them back. I'm going to grab some yellow and just put that straight on top of the green, what's left of the green, just so it's not too bright. And then this gives a bit more variation to the rot. So we can say we've got little bits of pus coming out, maybe green pus. And again, don't have to go over the same places. It doesn't have to cover the entire thing. You can stick to different regions, whatever feels right as you're making this. That gives us just a few variations on colour with that. So you can see we've got some yellows and greens all around the top and side. And then ultimately just need to leave that to dry before we come back in for the final part. Okay, we're giving the skull some time to dry. So what we're going to do now is come with some black paint, and that's going to give us the charred effect that we're looking for. So all we've done, a little blotch of black paint. There's no exact science to this. Try that again. There's no exact science to this. All you got to do is just go through and see what feels right, what looks right. If you do put too much on, you can just wipe that back off again. Sometimes you can see you've got a bit too much up here. Now's a good time if you've got any clumps of cling film that would still look a little bit too much like cling film, just get the black on there and really rub that in and just make it look like bent flesh. So we're going around most of the skull now. There are still some white bits here and there, but the light is really bright. It doesn't look anywhere near that bad close up, but we've gone around lots of black bits here. And that's basically a finished skull. Now, if you ignore the drying time, that took less than an hour to do that whole thing. So if you want to make yourself a really cool skull, what you need to do, go on somewhere like Makerworld, grab yourself a 3D skull. This one does have lightning infill, which makes it a lot lighter. Uses a lot less material. Or you can go down to your local hobby store and buy yourself a skull, wrap it up, ready for Halloween.